Welcome to the last episode of 2022 of Deckology, a podcast about playing cards. And in this episode, we are going over my top 5 decks of the year. Now, these are just top 5 decks that came out in 2022. I find myself playing with a lot of different decks of cards from 2015 all the way up to 2022. So one of the things that I'm going to do on this episode, if you follow me at Deckology, you can have a chance to have your question featured in an episode. And so for this episode, I'm going to be picking 5 questions. And in between questions, I'm going to go back and forth between decks. Before I start off, I got a cool new tool, and it will measure down to the millimeter the thickness of something. So this is a digital caliper. This one's from Gentech. I'm going to measure the thickness of 5 cards. Figured we just keep the whole thing of 5 going. And so we'll be able to tell the difference between the thickness of each of the cards, because my top 5 includes a couple of different stocks of playing cards. So this one is number 5, and this is the Missing Analog deck. What I like about this deck is when everything is in order. And the last time I probably had this deck in order is when I opened it. And when everything is in order, this missing logo thing itself spins around. And so they showed this deck off at Cardistry Con, and I thought this was pretty sweet. Now, I asked the designers about this deck, Matthew at Color Shift. So Matthew did a lot of the analog aspect of it. And so I asked him and he said, I still don't know what this means. But he said, so first it was a 56 frame rotation animation in Blender with a green background. That, I assume, not a food blender. I think that's a program. That video was transferred to a VHS tape. Then the video was played through a video mixer, a Panasonic MX50, on channel 1. On channel 2 was the preview out routed back into the input, which created a feedback loop, kind of like the visual version of a microphone squealing. Adjusted the chroma key on channel 1 and the feedback came through. I have negative idea of what I just read, but the originality behind this deck and the fact that you create a deck that has like a moving part within it, I think is one of the coolest things that I've seen in a deck since I got into collecting. Now, there's also cool things that you can do with this deck when it's in order, because like the gradient and the way that it all looks. But it also photographs really well, especially if somebody can do the Anaconda, which I've been working on, but I'm not even going to do that because it's going to go everywhere. And so, yeah, I like the fact that the sides have, the sides. I like the fact that the face cards are to the side, which I think is pretty cool. And then the court cards also are all custom as well. So I think that is pretty sweet, and it's kind of the congruent color that's going on from the front and the back. It does come with basically a map of the cards, so if you are wanting to put them back in order, this is the exact order they need to be in, so that you've got the missing thing spinning around. So I love the originality of this deck. Missing does a lot of really cool decks. They had one release that I didn't end up getting a chance to pick up this year. That was their ink version. It was black and silver, which I think I would have loved, but I just missed out on that. But so that probably would have been up there. But all of their decks, they always do something really unique to their decks, and so their designs, none of that is the same really. Even like some of the finishes, this would be like the deck of the year if it came out this year. But I believe this Articles one came out in 2021. I don't know when this one came out. But this one came out not in 2022. So, but they used like newspaper collages on this one and put it all together. So Nate, the guy that's also a designer for Missing, does a wonderful job. I like the originality of Missing, and the people behind it are also pretty cool people. So let's measure real quick. Let's just pick 5 random cards here, and let's see how thick they are. And these feel like just traditional stock. I don't think there's anything crushed or special about them. And tighten it just a little bit. There we go. Put it all the way up. So this comes in at 1.47, 1.48 when you put 5 of these cards in together. So that is the thickness of 5 of the Missing analog deck. Cool. All right, now let's get into one of the Instagram questions. And this one is, what is your that's funny, your microwave move? Also, thanks for your videos because they really are amazing and helpful. Follow-up question, some moves that you are learning or want to learn. So first off, my microwave move. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what a microwave move is, it is basically a fidget move. I coined that term when I was at Cardistry Con, and I was asking some people, what's like your microwave move when you're just kind of waiting on something in the microwave? And that generated some pretty impressive responses. There's some really impressive microwave moves. But I would say my go-to microwave move is like a rev cut or a fan. I like doing, I really like fanning cards because I just think it's like visually fun to look at and it's easy to do for me. So I'll just fan cards, close the fan. I'll riffle fan cards quite a bit. Riffling cards is always fun because it's just like that visual nature, which is also kind of why I like broken border cards quite a bit. And then the rev cut, I'll do something like that. My fingers aren't sticky enough to really do a lot of cool stuff, I guess. So I have to kind of stick to the easier ones for me. So I probably can't even do mantra right now. Kinda. But yeah, if my hands aren't sticky, which they never are, I'm left with fans and a couple of different like packet cuts or just swing cuts, things like that. Nothing too fancy. Nothing too fancy. If I get too fancy, I'm picking up cards and then I'm waiting and then I'm picking up cards. We got hardwood floors downstairs. I hate when I drop the cards on the hardwood floor because I also realize how often I need to sweep. Anyways, so that would be my microwave move. And then some moves that you are learning or want to learn. I've been working on, so I've got trigger down, which is a one-handed cut. So I've had that down for a while. This is just kind of a relatively basic one-handed cut. Now re-trigger is when you do that and then before you close it all, you pick up another little part and you close it and then you do it again and again and again, and you just kind of keep doing it. So that is one move that I have been working on for a little while now. Now, when I say I've been working on it, it's been pretty casual. So like you can kind of see there, I got one, and then like that second part is a little bit tricky for me. So I've been working on that one. And then a move that I want to learn is re-trigger. When you do that, you pick up half, and then somehow with a sticky thumb or something, you drag one of these out, and then you're able to do a bunch of other, yeah. So that's one that I'd really like to learn this year. That's like my 2023 goal, is to get the re-trigger down. But another thing that I'd really like working on is being able to do one-handed cuts with both hands. So I think that is something that I mess around with quite a bit too. It took me a little while, but I was pretty intentional about practicing rev cuts with both hands. I really like the idea of being able to get down a lot of the basics and be able to do that with both hands. So judo flip is a little bit hard still, but I've kind of got the gist of it. And then like Rev 2 and all that stuff. But anyways, this is not a card jam session. This is a podcast where I'm going over my top 5 cards, which is going to lead me into deck number 4. Okay, so it wouldn't be a top 5 list if I didn't have some kind of shiny card in the mix. And for that, I'm going with Fontaine Rainbow Edition. This one came out, I believe, in June of 2022. It is printed by Legendary Playing Cards. So they've got kind of a unique stock, like card stock. It almost feels plasticky, but it also feels broken in when you get them. So a lot of people will say that it like kind of they clump together over time, which is true. You get that with most decks of cards though if you use them enough. But this has smooth edges. I really like that. I like obviously the shininess factor is really cool too. This is one of my favorite decks of cards to go outside with when the sun is shining, especially during like golden hour, like when the sun is getting ready to set. This deck looks beautiful. But otherwise, this has been one of my go-to decks on a pretty regular basis. There's really nothing fancy about the front of the cards, just normal faces and all of that. Add cards, you've got the Fontaine Cards Center for Cardistry Exploration, which almost looks like a Scientology or something like that. Yeah, the only custom card is the Ace of Spades, which is a signature look for Fontaine. So I think that looks pretty sweet too, though. But otherwise, the shininess factor outside, they're durable, they feel great. Always, yeah, this is a fun deck, especially like I notice when I'm playing around with decks, like when it's like watching TV, lights are off, having a shiny, bright deck makes it picking up cards a lot easier. So I thought that's kind of an added bonus there. 2, 5. Well, I struggled to count to 5 there for a second. All right, so I'm going to measure the thickness of these 5 cards and see what we get. Okay, so these 5 are a little thinner than the previous ones. These are coming in at 1.4, 1.39 for 5 of these cards on the caliper here. So yeah, 1.4, 1.39, kind of going back and forth there. So they are a little thinner than the missing analog deck. So that's interesting. In your opinion, how is cardistry best filmed? What is a cardistry pet peeve of yours? So the way that I think cardistry is best filmed, it kind of depends on what you're going for. So I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but so for example, like there's a big range in what you film. So you've got people that, so like organic playing cards, they almost like create skits for their, they create like the OPC universe with some of their card drops. But they've got a nice like elegant style when they do just have their cardistry videos. But they also kind of have like these like, what are they called? Easter eggs. They've got like these Easter eggs within their videos too, which I think is pretty impressive. So there's like that like storytelling aspect of filming cardistry videos. And that's what I would chalk that up as. You got a lot of companies will do like the camera movement with the cards to kind of go and accentuate the moves with the cards. So you see that quite a bit. And then you've got probably what I feel like is the best by the verts. When you've got a robotic arm doing your pre-programmed cardistry moves, like going with it, I would say probably filming with a robot is probably the best way to go about it, because you will get absolute 100% precision to whatever you want it to do. And it will be super steady, and it will do everything that a human can't do, and it will remain stable while doing it. So that, I guess, so yes, there is a best version. I guess but it does depend on what you're going for. But if you're going off wanting to show off how cards look, I don't think you can beat a robot or the vert videos. That's just my opinion. And a cardistry pet peeve of yours. I would say probably people that get on a high horse about use your decks. Like, it doesn't matter. If you want people to collect them and they keep them sealed, I think that's fine. I've got a couple of sealed decks that mean a lot to me, so that like I don't want to open them. So there's some kind of intrinsic value. But there's also but the people that are under the camp of like, this is what you're supposed to do with cards, use them. I'm like, or you get a couple of decks and you seal one and you use the others. So it's when people get on some kind of high horse about use them, don't just look at them. I'm like, chill out. Like some companies do a really good job of being able to make cards that look amazing stacked up next to each other. Once again, I will refer to the Verts. I have none. I don't even have any of their decks. I just want their decks. First Playing Cards does a really, really good job with their collector stack ability. Orbit has a good one where like on the bottom of the things, you've got all of the Orbit logos. I think that looks cool. Fontaine's got Fontaine on top of all of their tuck cases. So sometimes like it's just kind of cool to see a bunch of decks stacked up next to each other, and the display itself is kind of like a art piece of itself. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be my pet peeve though, is people that get on some kind of high horse about thinking that using the cards is better than not. I'm like, just chill out, or get a couple of decks and save one and use the others. But whatever. Number 3. So this deck came from Cardistry Con. It is not for sale. There is no plan of selling this deck, although there is possibly a chance that there will be another version of this at the next Cardistry Con. This is the Pegasus deck by Hansen Chen. There was 500 of these printed for Cardistry Con. They were printed in Taiwan. Taiwan has that unique playing card feel. A little bit different, a little bit smoother, I feel like. So I feel like this is like a cardistry deck. And I say that because the way that this deck flourishes and like things are like, it's almost like every move that you do within cardistry, this circle and this design and the way that the white blends into the borders is very intentionally designed to be very appealing. So when I'm sitting by the microwave and I'm just doing fans, I've got this like really cool fan to look at. And it's not broken borders, but it almost looks like it could be in a way, I guess, like the way that they blend. Another company that does this really well, not to get too sidetracked, but the other deck, this is probably like the deck that I love the most, but this is from Orbit. So Orbit has, this is the V4. They've got how that spaceship actually is blending in with the side. And then you can see here with the Pegasus cards, how the line goes into the side as well. So I think this like a really good, I think that's like essential for cardistry cards, is like having something so that when you're doing a move, there is like kind of like motion within the cards, if that makes sense. Like, so like when I do rev cuts with these, the circles, when they start spinning, looks pretty cool. It looks a lot cooler than, let's say I take the Fontaines. Now this would look cool just because it's shiny, but you see just like a line basically spinning. It's not necessarily like a pattern that it looks cool when it spins. I can't do that flick thing yet, but so I think that looks pretty cool. I like cards that, so like when you do stuff like that, there is just like like, oh, that's really cool to look at. It's like there's like an extra perk the more moves that you can do, the more you can appreciate this kind of a deck. So I like this. I like the deck for that, and it feels great too. So let's pick up 5 of these cards. 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's see the thickness here. 1.36. Okay, so these 5 are a little bit, yep. So 1.36 is how thick these 5 cards come in. But yeah, Pegasus, awesome deck. I don't believe there is any chance of these coming to market to sell. So you'll have to pick one of these up from a reseller. And if you happen to have one of these, hit me up, because I'd like another one. Anyways, let's get into the next question here. What's your favorite cardistry accessories or one that you wish exist? So the main accessory for me that I've found most helpful, and if you are like me, you will appreciate something like this. So I have dry, cold, basically dead fingers. As I was saying earlier, it's hard for me to just have like a sticky enough finger to be able to even do basic cardistry moves where it requires a sticky finger to like get one card out or something like that. And so that can make doing playing card, or that can make cardistry things a little bit difficult. So the first accessory that I feel like is really good to have if you are like me, I've got this, it's called Raynaud's syndrome. It's where like I already have like poor circulation going on, so my hands are just always cold. And so I would go with, so this is like a 2-part thing here. This is called Take Hold. So what this is, I believe it was like initially designed for like cashiers or people that handle a lot of cash. Instead of licking your fingers, which is like the go-to, that can get kind of nasty after a time. Use this, it's kind of like this waxy material. So it makes your fingers pretty grippy, and I've used it on a couple of decks for a little while now because I was curious if it was going to cause any issues with cards being able to spread and all of that. And I really haven't noticed. Let me go grab the deck. So I used it through the month of December on this deck specifically. This is the Orbit Holiday Edition, Christmas 2021 edition from last year. And I used it, and that's a fan that I still have just right out of the gate. This is a year-old deck, and it still fans wonderfully. So I've definitely, having to pick up cards when you are in a roller chair gets intense. Okay. So it helps give you grip that you wouldn't otherwise have, and you don't have to like always be licking your fingers, which if you're traveling and you've got decks of cards, I'd rather have something like that than licking my fingers. So, but it does make isolating that one card a lot easier. So yeah, I would recommend picking up, it's called Take Hold. It's just a fingertip grip. Okay, so that helps with part 1 to my cold, dry fingers. Part 2 is a hand warmer. So I have these all year round typically, especially in the winter. And matter of fact, I keep them in my pockets like throughout the winter. My hands will get so cold. So you can buy a couple different sizes of these, and you can even get them that you put on the bottom of your sock, and they will keep your toes warm too. So I like the mega warmers a little bit more just because they're mega compared to the regular ones. So these will come in a 2-pack. The mega warmers will come in one large one. So that's the size difference. This thing really does last up to 18 hours. I'd say this one is from last night when I went to bed, probably around 10 o'clock. I was like, man, my hands are cold. And it's 1 o'clock right now. So still keeping me warm. Anyways, so what I'll do with these to actually make it, so if I don't have Take Hold with me, what I'll do is I'll just keep my hands in my pockets for a little bit, and your hands will get sweaty. They just will. They'll warm up and they'll get sweaty, and then you can do sweet cardistry things with it. So hand warmers and Take Hold are the first 2 accessories that I feel like help you out if you have cold, dry, dead fingers like I do. The other accessory is a deck clip. I don't use it very often. I guess when you travel and you do carry them in your pocket, it is helpful because then if you sit on or whatever, but then also you're sitting on like metal. So but I will use this, like, especially like if I feel like I've been practicing lately, going back to an old question, I've been practicing the lapel spread, which requires bending the cards quite a bit. Or if you're like learning the riff pressure fan, Anything where you're bending the cards quite a bit, I always just will leave this in, and it definitely will just kind of like stiffen up the cards a little bit overnight or something. So I keep one of these. They do make pretty high-end versions of it, and I'm working on something with somebody about maybe possibly making something like this out of carbon fiber that is going to be more useful and look cooler. But stay tuned for that. That would be like the second accessory. Now the third one would be, and I don't have one right now, but it would be like if you want to strengthen your hands, is like a finger grip. They make like little finger grip things. Really wish I could find mine right now, but that's really good for like strengthening your fingers. A lot of guitar players will use these things. If you don't have something like that, but you have like a dumbbell or something like that to work on your grip, what you can do is you can carry a heavy-ish dumbbell around and just kind of walk around with it. So it's called farmer's carries, but that will really get like forearm strength and your grip strength, and you walk around with it. Kettlebells, people do that. So like during like workouts, it'll be kind of like a finishing thing, but you have to walk like 40, 50 yards with something that's like these were like heavy for me at least, but like 70-pound kettlebells. And it's just like, by the time you get to the end, you're just like, kind of like when you like grab all the groceries from your car and you're like, I'm going to make one trip. It's like doing like that, but that will help with your grip strength as well. So there are different kinds of grip things. One's for individual fingers. There's ones that like spread out, which I ordered and did not get here because I wanted to try it out for this episode. And then there are just like your regular ones as well. I think the ones with individual fingers where you can exercise them, there are a lot of times they're used for rehabbing fingers. You do realize how weak some of your fingers are compared to the others on different hands. So I think it would be a very valuable tool for somebody that is getting used to cards as well. So finger strength, grip strength definitely comes in handy when doing playing card things. This is a 3D printed deck holder thing. So I'll provide I'll just throw a link to the 3D printed thing. There's a file. I found it on Reddit, and somebody, I think it was on Thingiverse maybe. So you can put in this one 2, 4, 6, 7 decks of cards. These, because this is just like having card displays is already hard enough to have. I've seen some pretty good ones, but I like these. I've got a handful of them. And they cost, people that printed some for me, I've had some people just like do it for free. I've had some people charge me. It was like $10. It wasn't a whole lot. They said, so I've heard print ranges for something like this comes in between like 10 to 12 hours. But then somebody that printed me one of them, they had like a fancy new machine at work and it printed it in like 2. It's something ridiculous. And okay, so that was the card. Let's get into the top 2 decks. I'm going to go with this one I just got recently, and I have not been able to put it down. This is the Grid Arrow series from Luke Wadley. This is the Grid ARW Edition 1. So I love this deck so much because right away, it's very springy. It was printed by Cardimundi, and he just printed 300 of these from his last Kickstarter. But this deck, the design is something that one thing I like about the design is it looks very chaotic. But then when you do like a fan with it, there's a pattern. So organized chaos is something that I think looks pretty cool. They feel very thin. So I'm going to expect that these are probably the thinnest of the bunch. I love the sharp green. Think that looks really cool. And then the face cards are all different as well. So it's a signature Luke Wadey design, the way he's kind of got different card names and numbers spelled out instead of your traditional thing. So he definitely spends a lot of time customizing the decks through and through. But yeah, this was the way, just for how springy it is. This is definitely one of my favorite decks of the year. It's in my top 2. Let's see how 2, 3, 4, 5. 1.28. Significantly thinner. So these are the Cardistry Slimline B9 stock or something like that. So that is significantly thinner than the other decks that we've messed with, but I love it. Some people, similar to like Legends playing cards, some people just really don't like that flimsiness that you get with these. But some people like me love it. Same thing with like the feel that you might have on those Legends cards. You hate it, you love it. I think universally, bicycle stock, it seems to be like the one that is just, everybody grew up with those. So I kind of feel like it's like you're used to it. But anyways, this deck, the way that it just looks when you're handling it, the way I love this deck. I want all of his Arrow series like that, and I just have this one. Anyways, that is my second favorite deck of 2022. Okay, what does the perfect cardistry deck have to have, i.e. broken borders, thin crushed? Okay, so the perfect cardistry deck for me, this will vary between everybody. So, but for me, it is it's thin crushed. Definitely you're spot on with that. I love the thin crushedness of it because it allows for some really smooth fans, riffle fans, things like that. Yes, absolutely. Broken borders to me are the coloring outside the lines, but then it creates something. So like on the sides here, you can kind of see how it just even is painted on the sides. Broken borders, definitely. And then I would have to tie in, similar to that Pegasus deck, some kind of like a design that kind of goes together well with the different moves that you might do. Should be an appropriate deck to showcase that. The Descendants, this one, has not come out yet. The spinning effect looks really good with these cards, but then the white, how it bleeds into the borders, I think is kind of like if you don't have broken borders, but you have something that like bleeds into the border, I consider that that's a right up there, right next to a broken border deck. So because of the effect that it creates, I think is what is really cool about any kind of cardistry deck. And then, so like I was saying earlier, so it's like you can have circles, but you can also have something that spins around and then almost hypnotizes you when you are doing stuff with it. So it's one of those decks where I feel like the way to describe a good cardistry deck is you can appreciate the deck more the better you get, because then you can just simply do cooler things with it, but then brings out different aspects of the card design on the back. So I appreciate a good tuck case, which is why you'll see something coming up for my number one pick. I also appreciate with the Cardistry collection or deck series from one company, when the decks combined make kind of its own design. So I think that's pretty cool. Like when there's something similar to it. So like you've got like on these Orbit decks that I've just got here, these three, like when you've got these stacked, I appreciate this kind of art that happens because of it. Yeah. And then it wasn't like this on this tally ho, but similar text on the side, so you can kind of see what you're working with. This doesn't necessarily have anything to do with a cardistry deck, but tuck cases though, it's like a preference. Like when you stack them together, it kind of all builds on top of each other. I believe First Shop they take the cake with that one, with their gold bars and holographic bar. Okay, let's get into the top deck of 2022. So this deck is from a friend of mine. I believe you can probably get it from resellers now. This was a Kickstarter. I didn't even get the Kickstarter. It happened in 2021, but the deck didn't get delivered until January, like early 2022. So that's when I got this deck. And so that's why I consider this a 2022 release, because of when it came out. Just because it was funded doesn't mean it was in production and created until the next year. So that's why I just feel like I needed to have some kind of a technicality associated with this. So, but this is the In Session from my friend Danny. This is his company, In Session, and this is the sophomore year of his playing card line. What I love about this deck right off the bat, it's like your old school binder. So you've got like this Velcro binder. So those of you that, I don't know if they still have like these binders used in schools or if there's tablets nowadays, but when I was growing up in the 90s and going to school, that was a thing, even in the early 2000s. So the tuck case already, amazing. I know he spent extra money on this. I say it was worth it. And then, so he's got this like 90s theme. And if anybody knows me, you know that I'm a nostalgic individual. So anytime I see some kind of throwback thing that takes me back to those days where before I had bills and other responsibilities, I'm always like, sweet. But this deck has broken borders. It feels great. It's just bicycle stock. I like the design because it's, like I said, it's got that similar, like almost kind of looks chaotic, but it is a strategic chaotic. So I like that about this deck. The broken borders are really just like what bring this deck home. It's also the deck that I first was able to do the riffle fan with as well. And it's a perfect deck to practice that with. I have used this one. This is the new one that I just opened, but so I got this Jack of Diamonds. It's like very standard issue bicycle. And then this Jack of Diamonds. So what I like about this one is he incorporated different things from the 90s. Like this is a Walkman CD player on all of his cards. And so Organic Playing Cards does this really well too, in my opinion, where they kind of keep the court card pretty much the same, but there is like an alternate version of it, if that makes sense. And I like that. So when that is done on cards, I appreciate that level of detail that is thought into these. This King of Diamonds is holding a Nintendo 64. That was I believe 1996 when I got that for Christmas, and it was amazing. I remember getting the blue controller with that one. That was so like this deck kind of creates the like almost like a nostalgic, very intrinsically valuable deck for me. So when I see it, I'm kind of like, oh, I remember this, I remember that. So it's like kind of takes you down memory lane. When I've talked to Danny on podcast before, he has mentioned that this is influenced by Saved by the Bell. And you can definitely see that if you've watched some of that show. But otherwise, he incorporates different aspects of like the 90s in his deck, and I really like that. So when there is fun little Easter eggs within face cards on the front of a deck, I will appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm not like, face cards aren't very good, I'm not going to get the deck. I like the back design of this one. I like being able to carry this one around. A lot of the people I'm around are 90s babies and whatnot. We grew up in the 80s, so they see this and they're just like, whoa. And then it's kind of fun to be able to go through the face cards and just basically it's a conversation starter all the time. You go through this, and when I travel with it, we talk about like the Nickelodeon slime on this Jack. So this, it's just cool how we incorporate a lot of things that prompt a lot of fun conversations with people. I know if you're a magician though, that can be an issue, because then people are like, it's a fake deck or whatever. Like I know that's where and why a lot of people don't customize cards that whole lot. But yeah, I thought these were really cool. The broken borders, I love the shades of blue, pink, yellow. All of it just plays really well together. And then he's also got a gilded version of this deck as well. But this is a very shiny, perfect blue gilded deck. And this was my first gilded deck. Get to focus here. Sorry if you're listening, but yeah, it's a shiny blue, and it works and handles wonderfully. So having a shiny blue deck is like the best of both worlds when you have partially shiny, but also colors that like play well together. Gilded decks were definitely a hit here in this past year. So I think it's kind of cool to have something like that hits home for me. So shout out to Danny for sending me that. And when I mentioned earlier that about sealed decks, the only deck that I have that is sealed that I have no intention of opening is number 3 of 75 of the gilded deck that Danny hand punched out the binder holes to show off the gilded. The one and only deck that I've got right now that is sealed, because it means more than just a deck of cards to me. So I've had a lot of good conversations with Danny over the last year, and consider him a friend. And when I've got a friend that's designing decks, I think that's pretty cool. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 1.41 thickness. 1.41, 1.42 for those 5 cards. So I believe these are just standard bicycle stock cards. So reasons why you think lots of collectors keep their decks sealed, and then a follow-up question, and do you think their value will decrease because there are so many? So I believe a lot of people keep decks sealed for a number of reasons. I think the main reason is there's some form of intrinsic value to them. I think the second reason would be it's like if you have a mint deck, then you've got something that, if you ever needed to resell it or you needed the money, you can get maximum dollar for it. And then also the third part is sometimes when you have a nice pristine collection of anything, it displays well. So if you have people that come over to your house, you have talking points about something and it's all mint in there. So as far as the display goes, I think that is like displaying used decks still is cool though. But I think there is it's mostly intrinsic value, or with hopes of being able to sell it one day and get way more than your money's worth. So for me to keep a deck sealed, there's got to be some level of intrinsic value to it. Otherwise, I'm definitely probably going to open it and play with it. But definitely going back to the pet peeve from earlier, I can't stand when people get judgy about people that just keep their deck sealed. And then part 2 of that question, do you think their value will decrease because there's so many? Yes, because that is actively happening according to some of the auctions that I've been keeping an eye out on SoCal playing cards. The most recent one that really caught my eye was the difference between in November, there was a Fontaine's Gilded Carrot deck that sold for nearly $1,300. And then in December, it sold, another version of it sold for $750. So 40-ish% drop in value. I saw recently with the first playing cards, V1, V2, those prices have gone down quite a bit. I know that those were a pretty large print run, but for some reason there for a while you couldn't get a V1 for less than $100. And now I saw that you can probably get them for $50-$60 now. So yeah, I do think quantity definitely matters. Anyways, that's my top 5 for 2022. Shout out to Danny for what I would consider Deckology's inaugural deck of the year. In the comments below, let me know which decks you like. And if you guys want to keep the conversation going, you can follow me at Cardistry Tyler or at Deckology on Instagram. And then if you follow Deckology, be on the lookout for a question or whatever thing it's called, a sticker, to submit your question for the next episode. Subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye. Oh yeah, and Happy New Year.